Here we go. So, my friend Jess Weisz is with us today to discuss impact investing and companies creating systemic changes. So, Jess, I'd love for you to give us a bit of an intro of who you are, your background. I know you well. We worked together many, many, many years ago when we were still very young at BMO. But I'm sure everyone would love to hear what you've been up to.
Well, now I have to figure out how do I introduce myself as I'm like continually trying to figure that one out. I am I guess, a recovering corporate person from BMO like you, but then also social entrepreneur now in a point of wandering and figuring out my next who I want to be when I grow up, because I don't know about you, but I'm still young. So I McKinsey and BMO, so I learned the corporate ropes, know how to do things, then did SaaS and got the venture capital pin of in the tech space. And then as I said, built my own social enterprise, but then COVID hit. And since then have become obsessed with what is it that companies specifically can do to create a more sustainable and inclusive economy.
Yeah, you were really the first one who I was chatting with who was putting so much emphasis on systemic changes. So, would you like to give a bit of a definition of system change in the context of impact investing?
Yeah, and I don't even. So, I mean, I think, yeah. So, in terms of impact investing, and I think it relates to all investing. Every dollar we invest, every dollar that I or you invest, is a vote for the future we want to see. And so every time we put a dollar into an Uber or an Uber lookalike, we're voting that says, yeah, we want more Ubers in the world. And so any investment is charts what we will have. And so since every investment charts what we'll have in the future, the question then is, how are we looking at what we're reinforcing and how do we want to change it? And that's where system change can come, because if you see and you sort of step back and you look at how things work, and really I'm very squarely focused on what are the systems that allow certain people to win at the exclusion of others. So it's sort of like, where do the 1% win out over the 99, or where do some people not have access unfairly? And so that's where I think about, okay, well, if we want to create new systems and where more people can win in the game of life, how do we put our money in that direction so we can have more of those new types of systems in the future? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I like how you made the connection as well with responsible consumer. The fact that it's not just investors who have this burden, but also as a consumer, we vote with our dollar and with our feet every day. So
totally. You want more organic bananas to see? You're going to buy organic bananas, right? Like if you buy, yeah, that's exactly.
Well, and I think one point that you're making that's very important as well is whether you're an investor or a consumer, that your efforts are not limited to addressing, the symptoms of the problems in the system, but rather you're trying to chip away at the root causes within the system, and I think that's a big difference with many of the models we're looking at, usually without systemic change.
Totally. Well, because I don't think that otherwise it is systemic change, right? It's just performative. Marketing, like CSR-based marketing. Like, to me, a good example, and this isn't related to investing, but I just saw it now, so it's top of mind. But Instacart just put out this celebration of their personal shoppers, and and celebrating and applauding them for all the great work that they've done and the help that they've provided families across North America over this past year. Then I'm sort of thinking, and then they chart up like how much they've earned and whatever. But it's so opaque that you don't actually see their true wages. And what about instead of putting all of that marketing money towards like boosting, which is really just brand building, towards paid sick days or like better wages? Because I bet you dollars to donuts, those guys are not making decent wages. So to me, that's like what you're talking about, which is unless you change the system, everything else is performative.
Well, so that's interesting you say that. So I remember having this conversation years ago with one of my friends when we were discussing, what Bill Gates, and nothing, obviously it was years before the pandemic, so there is no polemic around Bill Gates here, around what he was doing with his foundation in Africa, where some of the foundations he was sponsoring, or some ONG, were about providing mosquito nets to some of the populations that were at risk with malaria. And what I was discussing with my friend was, well, that's nice, but you want to give access to clean water. Otherwise, well, you always have malaria. That's great, you have nets, but but I think you still need to provide, I would say, short-term relief. So I hear what you're saying. I would think that hopefully not everything is performative. I think some of that is performing, a role in terms of investing or allocating dollar, even if it's not necessarily changing the system. And I'd love to hear your perspective. I just think we need both.
I think there's a difference, though. I think, if something is like paving the way, right? You could do, future change, maybe, right? You're sort of, let's go back to Instacart. Let's say we're potential investors in Instacart. And you say, you know what, this is great because it allows people more flexible jobs and allows people to work as they like. And it also provides an essential service, or a very helpful service, right? I think the question, though, is, and this is where people get lazy, is not lazy, but I think then this is where you truly get to see the difference between shareholder versus stakeholder capitalism, and whether you actually believe it, right? Because invariably what you'll do is you'll say, you know what, good enough, let's do a marketing campaign and profile some of these people to show we really care, and maybe send everybody some pizza coupons, right? Instead of going and saying, okay, no, let's not do the marketing campaign, let's not do the pizza coupons, but pay everyone for sick days, right? And if you're sick, tell everybody to stay home from the grocery store, tell all their personal shoppers to stay home from the grocery store. And instead, don't give them, the need to make their own personal choice of whether they go in to the grocery store potentially with COVID or not. And so to me, I just think it becomes lazy or it's lazy or truly not stakeholder considerate. And truly it's, you have to be stakeholder first. Like there's no way you can kind of sometimes be for the shareholder and sometimes be for the stakeholders. And then it's just a question of how quickly you want to see things change and preserve one's own power.
And I think in your example, not to beat on these poor people at Instacart, but there is probably something that is more akin to greenwashing and maybe slightly disingenuous, which wouldn't fall anyway in the impact investing category whatsoever. I think what's very interesting right now is to see this system change becoming a bit of an emerging practice in impact investing, where people want to, again, improve the very systems that produced the problems in the first place, versus merely treating the symptom, even if, again, I do think at some point you need to treat the symptoms, because, well, otherwise you're just saying that whoever is unfortunately under these circumstances become collateral damage, and we're just looking at the system and we don't care about them. So I, at least in the impact investing context, I think you still do need, unfortunately, some solutions, to your point, that pave the way. And while also working on more systemic changes.
Yeah, Rome. I guess what you're saying is Rome wasn't built in a day, and I'm saying I think some people can have grander visions to build Rome faster if they actually wanted to.
Yes, and and that's very interesting. This conversation on Rome wasn't built in a day, and maybe I'm old school, and that's my corporate my corporate blood that's still talking into me. That I speak very often. I'm very fortunate to speak with many people in the space, and sometimes I'm looking at the goals, but also the way to reach these goals. And it seems sometimes a bit naive, in the sense that, to your point, Rome wasn't built in a day, and hoping that, well, guess what? We need to drop financial returns because it's just a way to continue inequalities and to have the same problem. I absolutely agree with the concept, but or are you implementing that? Having the best ideas that are not implementable. I'd rather have ideas that maybe are not as lofty, but where actually I can see progress. So I'm not sure what's your perspective on that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, an idea that's not implemented is just an idea, right? It doesn't do us any good, right? I guess my sense is that we have enough resources to not have. There are enough resources in this world today for everyone to have a decent standard of living. And it has more to do with our own desires for power, it has more to do with a differencing in values than in resources. And I think what impact investing at its best does is shift values to see, and is working towards shifting our values, so that we value things differently, and therefore we reward them better differently in our economic system. Right, like, because
I think it's what you're saying, going from kind of avoiding harm to benefiting all stakeholders to actually contributing to solutions, that evolution. And I absolutely agree with you with your assessment that there is obviously way enough resources available for all the population of the world to be living with a standard of living that is definitely decent. I'm always asking myself that question. As you know, at some point I was managing a family office for a very wealthy individual. And I remember the EA, she was telling me at some point, she's like, but why doesn't he give me 1 million? For him, it's nothing. And I told her, I said, well, why don't you give $10,000 to someone in India? For you, it's nothing, but for that person, that's going to change their life. And then she looked at me and she was like, what are you talking about? But yeah, you're extremely privileged. So it's this question of, are people okay not having 2 cars or even 1 car, not having going on vacation 2 or 3 times a year, so everyone lives well. So there's a bit this crossing finger saying, wow, before I do it, Jeff Bezos needs to do it, and so basically we're all thinking that it's the neighbor who needs to stop enjoying his good lifestyle so everyone can live better, so I agree with you, but it's always the same thing. What do you do with that?
And that comes down to values, right? And I think that impact investing, the contribution that impact investing makes, is they're starting to shift how we see value in a financial terms, right? We're starting to, so as an example, I was looking at a Brazilian company that bought a whole whack of the Amazon rainforest and has amalgamated different owners. And essentially what they've done is they sell voluntary carbon credits. Now it gets them less of a return than if they were to do logging, but it is better for the world, right?
Yeah.
And now with the introduction with crypto, you can start to monetize that way better and provide more liquidity for the property owners than before, right? So there's new opportunities for them to make money by protecting the earth as opposed to extracting from it, right? So currently the only real way to make money is to extract from somebody else or something else. And what is the way? And so when you with impact investing, and then you see that opportunity, like, oh, that's worth it. And then we start to attribute value to things that otherwise didn't get value before, and then you're attributing also new types of values. What I'm talking about, like sustainability as opposed to extraction and that kind of thing.
Yes,
capital fee values.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And that was a bit the next point I wanted to make with you, which was, okay, why does it matter to look at system change? And I think that's one of the elements that make it so important to look at system change versus just impact investing.
Yeah, and I think, and to me, what I'm getting more into is this notion of where are we underperforming, and how are companies underperforming, and not underperforming it in the traditional sense of like EBITDA to whatever, right? But where are they underperforming in terms of wage equality and product and service accessibility and on, and environmental sustainability, because in there, that's where we have the root of these challenges of like, it's way crappier to be a Black high school educated or not high school educated individual male than it is to be, a white male with a master's, right? So you're sort of, so like, when we understand that, well, then there's systems that are creating that inequality, and then therefore our institutions, including our public or private companies, are underperforming.
Yeah, that's, it's very interesting when you start looking, we all think we have free will. And actually, you realize how small your box is, because, to your point, between all the systems that are in place around us that are full of bias, and then you add, your family, your religion, your this, your that, you realize that actually your free will is pretty limited to a small box,
Yeah, but don't we all control those institutions? So then therefore, shouldn't we all be able to change them? And that's where I come back. It's like just laziness.
Well, I don't agree with that, because I think many people don't even see it. I don't think people.
Yeah, no, that I agree with.
Yeah, it's not that people are. And when I say people, sorry, I'm including myself in that. Like I'm not better than anyone. I have tons of beer myself. But I think the first realization, it's realizing you have beer. and that there is definitely, to your point, you're part of that system, so we're also benefiting about some of that. One thing I'd love, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, you've been obviously in the space for many years now. Would you have examples of companies you think are doing great things in that context of systemic changes?
Yeah, I mean, I just wrote about one today, and we've got David O'Leary on the line. He also has an interesting company. But I'll talk about Beneplan. So Beneplan, the health benefits company, so they're essentially like Costco, where a bunch of small companies they create a buying group, and they get better rates for their members for health benefits, so like dental and health coverage for massage and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why they're awesome is because the system doesn't work for small businesses. You have to be a mega big company to get a decent rate on health insurance. Why? Because A, you have bargaining power. B, you likely have a health benefits HR person or a really good broker that's going to review your rates every year, right? And they're going to say, oh, you paid this much in premiums, but your employees only submitted this much in claims. You've got way too good of a coverage. You're paying way too much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's adjust, right? Mm-hmm. Small companies can't do that. They don't have the HR. They don't have the buying power. They don't have the HR person to do that often. And brokers are usually not going to give as much of a time of day as they would for the big guys. 99.8% of the companies in Canada are small businesses, and they employ 85.6% of Canadians. Mm-hmm. So the chances are we all work for the little guy. So what are they supposed to do, right? So essentially what's been happening is that the insurance, the differential between the premiums and claims has grown and grown and grown in the last 20 years. And why? Well, because they've sort of taken advantage of the small guys, right? And they give the best deals to the big guys, right? Or they only give the good deals to the ones that whine the most. Like whenever my rates go up, I call every year and they reduce them back down. Right? You really have to be on top of it. So what Beneplan has done they've gone and amalgamated everybody together to act like a big company. Not only that, they've also said, you know what, we provide a social good, so we're going to cap our profits. It doesn't make sense for us to make limitless profits. We're going to tell you that if there are unused premiums at the end of the year, after we pay for our admin fees, we're going to give it back to you. Mm-hmm. So there's no question about whether, you roll the dice and you're getting too much coverage or too little coverage in any given year. Because either A, you're going to get back, or B, if you have more claims than what your coverage allowed, or than your premiums, the co-op covers you.
Okay.
And so it's like, to me, that is saying there's systemic change in so many ways there, in that A, it's giving good quality insurance to companies who otherwise did not have access to it, A, and B, it's being very thoughtful on the rents that financial services can extract from the economy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that has been a huge shift in late, where a lot of the money goes away from the producers, like the folks making like websites and cell phones or furniture, to the financial companies that are just shuffling around the money. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, to me, it's like on so many levels, they're changing the game.
I love that you took an example in the financial services industry, because I agree with you. Obviously, knowing the space quite well, as like you do, it's a never-ending industry where the inequality of information and opacity, makes it easy to actually extract this type of rent that you were mentioning. I'm very interested as well, offline, you mentioned a business that I thought was great, that was more in the food business, and you were talking about soup, and I don't want to say too much about it. Do you want to say a few words?
I mean, essentially, there's one company where they make food out of, that you and I would pay for, out of stuff that otherwise would have gone in the garbage. And to me, that's like, you know, a huge win on the environment, but also a huge one for food producers, where most of the stuff that which allows them to make money off of stuff that, you know, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to make money off of. So I think, yeah.
And
what was your interest there?
But no, because I thought it was a great idea to do that, because to your point, it benefits multiple actors. One question I had is, do you know if they're also selling their products at a discount, or is it the same pricing but a normal soup or a normal whatever?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know how they do their margins, but I would imagine that they probably also have a certain level of cost that comes from the unorthodox way that they get their inputs.
Actually, in Europe, you have more and more restaurants that are using absolutely every piece. For example, if you're making fish, you tend to throw away a lot of the part of the fish. And now, you know, they're actually, and I love it because it's also very creative. So they are actually offering in the menu things that you would never seen, because these were pieces that were traditionally thrown away. So I think it's a good angle as well. There is a lot of hype, let's not forget about it. But at the same time, if you avoid having 50% of a fish going to the garbage, you know, I don't really care about the hype. I still think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of how companies, producers, creators of the goods and services that we consume are more thoughtful of their overall impact and the value that they're contributing to the world and society. And so yeah, I love that. That's like a perfect example of an impact-driven company that an impact investment might go to.
Yeah, and you know, and David's on the line. He mentioned that last time. Actually, you are also on that discussion. You know, I'm really I won't say enamored, because there's a negative sense of infatuation, but I really like this idea of responsible consumer, because we always tend to think we need to be very wealthy or to be in a position of power to be impacting the world. And all these different steps, even if you're not a business, because here, okay, well, I'm not SMBs, you're not SMBs, we can still have a lot of power with the way we spend our dollar and our time and all of that. And I think that's probably the message I would love more and more to spread around, which is you're more powerful than you think. And actually because it also helps people to be more deliberate. And again, that includes me. When I say people, I'm not saying I'm above that, but when you realize that everything you do, you say, have an impact, positive or negative, well, maybe you're a bit more thoughtful in terms of where you're spending your dollar and what you're saying to one person or another. So I like it very much. Any parting thoughts? It's unbelievable. It's already 1:29. I thought we spoke for 3 minutes only, but any things you want to make sure everyone is living with?
Subscribe to my newsletter, Rule Breaker, at substack.com, because that's where I'm covering all of these interesting companies. But otherwise, no, to me, this is just like me and you chatting. And then if other people hear it, great.
Well, you know, I always believe that even if you get a little nugget, it was time well spent. But thank you so much, Jess. I recorded it, so we'll be able to put the Zoom audio on social media, so everyone is going to be able to listen to it, whether they have Clubhouse or were available or not. So it was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Amazing. Thank you for chatting.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.